You're listening to Forge Theater Labs.
Where does that idea come from?
A podcast devoted to exploring theater history.
Is anything that original?
Concepts and storytelling.
Isn't that just an assumption?
And the creation of theater from behind the scenes.
How do they even do that?
This is Forge Theater Labs.
History, innovation, perspective.
Welcome to Forge Theater Labs. I'm Josh Hsu, your host. Today, we're talking with Chelsea Sutton. Chelsea Sutton is a playwright, fiction writer, and theater director. As a director specializing in new work, she has helmed the development of over 20 new plays, and her own work has received support from theaters and festivals across Southern California and nationwide. She's worked with Rogue Artists Ensemble in Los Angeles for 13 years, where she co-founded the Rogue Lab New Play Incubator. She's currently serving as the interim artistic director. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to talk to you about Rogue Artists Ensemble and all the amazing things that you've done for over the past, 15 years now?
Rogue is 20 years old.
Oh,
we
my
turned
goodness.
20 last year.
That is incredible. For those who don't know, right, outside of Los Angeles, outside the bubble of Los Angeles, what Rogue does, can you kind of sort of describe your mission statement, your general aesthetic for us?
Sure. We use the term hypertheater, which I always have to explain to folks a little bit because it's a funny way to explain what we do. But hypertheater is basically taking ancient storytelling techniques and modern technologies and mashing them together to make very environmental, immersive kind of work. I say immersive kind of lightly because what that really means to us is world building. Our plays tend to be magical realism. They are design forward. And they're always pushing boundaries of content or mode and multidisciplinary collaboration.
Amazing. In terms of at the heart of hypertheater, what was the sort of inspiration for it? What led you to this discovery of hypertheatricalism?
Well, I was not part of the founding group. The group first formed out of Rogue was they formed out of UC Irvine in Southern California. So really, we are 20 years old, but that's just when we got our nonprofit. I think they started doing work in 2001. And UC Irvine, from what I understand, was very realistic theater, very straightforward kind of theater. And there's these group of weirdos who wanted to do puppets and masks and mess with stuff a little bit more, have movement, commedia dell'arte, all those things, clowning. And it just wasn't as available. And so what do you do when you're 22? You can't find the thing you want, you make it. And so that's what they started to do. I know they had some mentors who helped them along the way, but I think it really was just a group of weirdos, and honestly, mostly designers. That is the unique thing about Rogue, is that we didn't form out of just directors and writers and actors. Most of the founding members were designers of some kind or multidisciplinary of some kind. The founding artistic director is a puppeteer and a puppet designer and a mask designer, and I think was always a director, but probably fell into it because he wanted to make work that he wanted to see. And it was the same for everybody else.
That speaks to me so incredibly, because too often, right, I am, right, always interested in design forward experiences. And while I have a background in acting, I really found my passion and my feet as a designer and as a director. How does that differ from, let's say, an acting ensemble, compared to a design ensemble? How is that process different? Because obviously you don't always have performers wanting to do a X role or certain thing. How does that sort of inform the creative process?
Well, it then tends to start with ideas and visuals and how do we make design part of the dramaturgical life of a play. Our development work is very much about that cohesion of design and story. My background is mostly in playwriting and directing. If I had to pick one, I would always pick writing. And I know from experience that writers are often told, write your two-hander in a living room because that's the only thing that can be produced. Or finally get to the production stage, and that is when you get to talk to designers. That's when we're talking about the visuals. And I've always been a very visual writer, but I didn't have people who I could talk to and say, okay, how can the set be part of the dramaturgical support of the story? It was just like, it's a living room or it's a whatever. Those conversations came so late in the game, and we start those right at the beginning when a play is developing.
I want to sort of go back to something because,
Yeah.
obviously immersive theater is all the craze right now. It's all
Yeah.
over the country, in community theaters, we sort of see these experiences, right? And you sort of highlight that you were lightly immersive. Something that is for me was that you were sort of pioneers within this sort of immersive space. You sort of, right, the first time I saw a Rogue Artist Ensemble show, that was the moment that I was like, this is something different. This is something new. This is a different world that I'm walking into. I am jarred. I am taken in. Um,
What was that first play you saw?
oh my goodness, it was so many years ago, probably over 20 years ago. I don't even remember the name of it, but it was, I was exposed to them through UC Irvine all
Okay.
those years ago. And then I saw them again in LA, and I think it was Mr. Punch.
Okay.
Um, all those years ago. I'm trying to remember what it was called, but it was many years ago. And I remember just
We are old.
walking.
Yes, we're old, Josh. We got it many
We're
years
old.
ago.
We're old, and I'm a little bit sleepless with my third child. So, um, but it was such a different experience. It definitely felt like I
Mhm.
was entering a different world. And I think that is a core characteristic of immersive theater. And so,
Absolutely, yeah.
how would you then distinguish yourself further from immersive
Well,
theater?
I wanna say I had the same experience when I first encountered a Rogue show. I went, "Oh, you can do this? I wanna do this." Um, I think I say lightly immersive just because, I mean, the immersive community in LA is so prolific and intense, and immersive, I think, really does at least right now, I think speaks to a certain kind of theatrical experience. And so I don't want to commit us directly to being immersive out of respect for the people who are doing true immersive work all the time. I think there's always something immersive about what we do, but I would characterize it as world building. So you walk into the space and you feel like you're in a different world, just as you said. Immersive, though, at least in modern day theatrical spaces, it's when you go to like a true immersive show, you are part of the story. The environment is completely changed in some way to be about the story, and you are partaking in it and could possibly even change it. Actors are connecting with you, making you do things, that kind of thing. We certainly don't have any respect for the fourth wall. We break it all the time. There's certainly interaction in everything we do. And we have done a couple true immersive shows. We did Kaidan Project Walls Grow Thin in 2017 was our first true immersive show. You show up, you're a group of 12 people, and you walk through this 6-story warehouse to like save a woman, and you encounter ghosts, and you somehow survive. And we did Senior Plumber's Final Fiesta in 2018, which was total opposite of vibe and was less on a track, but people could just explore the space where we had come together to bring the memories of Eugenio Plummer, who's the namesake of Plummer Park in West Hollywood. We'd brought his whole autobiography to life. But you could kind of choose to go wherever you wanted in that way.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How did you decide that those experiences would be immersive? Like, did it start
Mm.
with the story, or was it, a decision like, we as a company for this one want to create something that's more immersive, or we want to do something more traditional, without necessarily, keeping the proscenium, right, like as a hard wall, but still sort of traditionally offer a narrative to our audiences? Like, how does that sort of line up in your season making, or decision making process?
I think it's really hard to make an immersive show if you don't know it's immersive from the beginning, because it has a completely different structure. Kaidan really did start from we want to make a completely immersive show. Now, we didn't know what the tone would be. Sean, the artistic director at the time, I think had lots of conversations with East West players over the years about doing some sort of adaptation of Japanese ghost stories. Now, we had, as a group, been kind of interested in what is this structure of immersive theater? Like, how do we even begin to make it? And also, Japanese ghost stories, there's so many of them. And we weren't looking to just adapt one, we wanted to adapt a lot of them. So there's going to be a lot of vignettes. Okay, how do we build something that pulls all of them together? How do we find a through line in a narrative that can kind of pull us through them? So we did a first experiment at the Japanese gardens in Van Nuys during the light of day. Me and a group of writers just figured out some sort of structure that had like a beginning group situation, and then people explored the grounds and encountered ghosts. And there's only maybe one or two moments that were scary, but like it's really hard to be super scary in the light of day in Southern California. Um, so it taught us a lot, but we weren't yet sure where we could actually truly produce this thing. So it was a little bit on hold until we found the 6-story warehouse that was built in 1920.
Hmm.
And then suddenly it became a horror. Like we just full on embraced the horror of it all. Um, the warehouse had this huge elevator, like oh geez, what are they called? For
Freight elevators, cargo
freight
elevators.
freight elevator. Thank you. Basically, that thing did all of our storytelling for us. It's very creepy. The gate coming down.
You could hear the
Um,
gears moving. Yeah.
oh yeah, I thought I was gonna die every time I went on that elevator. Um, and so then we could respond to the environment in a very
Mm.
specific way and write and build for that space, which I think is usually another hallmark of immersive theater is you really are responding to the space you're in.
It's such a fascinating thing because when I think about design forward experiences, right, we are always talking about designing for that, right? Now, obviously you're a writer, you founded this new play incubator, right? So when you're looking at sort of the inverse, when you're not creating immersive experiences, like how do you as a committee, as a group, decide whether you're approaching X folklore or X fairy tale or X historical characters? Like, is there a why now test that needs to be passed in order to sort of meet that right story of the time when you're producing a show? Or is it kind of like, I have this cool idea of this puppet, and then we go from there?
I mean, oh, the why now test. I will say up front that our plays sometimes take so long to develop that it's
Hmm.
hard for us to be really spry and to like make something that is in direct reaction to a thing that's happening in the world like tomorrow or
Hmm.
today and have something a week from now. We're just not, we're slow. We're slow as molasses. Um, but I think what we have to ask with every new idea is what makes the story urgent to tell right now? Is it speaking to a hot topic? And is that topic something that is actually just part of the cycle? Like as a human race, we are not we don't learn real quickly. So we go in these same cycles, and unfortunately, some of the things we were writing about 150 years ago are still very relevant now.
Absolutely.
Um, but what makes something enduring, and the thing that I think will make a play not burn out is that there has to be an enduring human story that makes a play kind of everlasting. Um, I'll take our play Wood Boy Dogfish as an example, just maybe because I wrote it and I know it really intimately. Um, it's an adaptation of Pinocchio, which is an incredibly old story, and I think, I mean, the company wanted to do a Pinocchio play years before I was around. It had been, I think, probably rolling around their heads since they were in college. Like, obviously, we should do a Pinocchio play, and it should be steampunk and macabre and cool, and should be for adults. Um, But like, why? Who needs another Pinocchio? Disney did it very well. Why do we need another Pinocchio in the world? Um, so I mean, it's based on a fairy tale. There's enduring quality to it, but our version of it definitely had some socially relevant topics. It had capitalism stuff, had consumerism stuff. It was very much about exploitation and the commodification of our bodies and our souls. Um, the world kind of sees us all as puppets. And what was unique about our version of Pinocchio is that the lead character was actually a puppet and not just like a little boy painted to look like one. We had a Bunraku puppet as our main character, which is
Mm.
a huge feat to have a puppet on stage that long as the main character. Um, but then underneath all of those topics, it's also about grief and it's about growing up and letting go and how to find your way back home. And that stuff doesn't really age out. We're always looking for that stuff. So I think pairing those things together, finding ways that these stories speak to important issues in our world, but also like you just have to tell a good story that speaks to our heart. If you
And I
have
think
both
also,
those things, then it works.
yeah, absolutely. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, 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 no.
Um, I think, one of the things like finding that sort of long story, but also, not to get Brechtian, but like, this idea of using puppets gives us that distance, gives us that ability to step outside that sort of what would be a typical living room drama or a
Yeah.
story and sort of, right, really focus on that. Everybody's talking about the wolf play, right? Everybody like it's the hottest ticket in town, but like that's been true all of that. Now,
Mhm.
all this time, right? In terms of like like puppets and the power of the puppets.
Well,
Uh,
I think a genre works that way too. Magical realism. I write a lot of magical realism and horror in
mhm,
all modes of writing because I think those genres can speak to social realities in ways that like realism sometimes can't as well. You know?
absolutely, where realism feels preachy, right? If
Yes.
we were to
Yes.
engage with these social topics, but having that sort of distance, having that
Exactly.
separation allows us to accept it, acknowledge it, right? Or at least put our blinders on to say, "Oh, it's a different world," right? But yet
Exactly. Yeah.
also have those ideas. Um, it's interesting to sort of think about puppetry. I've talked to other puppet artists out there, and a lot of times they say the hardest thing is to get people and puppets to interact.
Yeah.
And I want to get your take on it, right? After being there for 13 years, what is your sort of take, right? Because obviously your productions have varied from production to production. And so, what is that sort of interaction like? Is it better to have this sort of only puppet show or can there be a mix?
Absolutely. I feel like we've done more mixes than not. I mean, a lot of our kids shows end up being all puppets. Um, but like our adult shows is almost always a mix. Kaidan, Senior Plumber, Woodboy Dogfish, and Woodboy being one of the prime examples. You have this main character of a puppet who, I mean, we had to have a dramaturgical discussion about like, can we have other puppets in this world? If we have basically a puppet come to life, and it's strange that this puppet is coming to life, we can't you have to figure out what is the like boundary around what other puppets can be like moving and talking in as characters in this particular world. So we did have other puppets, but they were like marionettes in a show, or they were like in a magical space like Fish when he was underwater, things like that. Um, but these moments with like his father with Geppetto, these had to be like true acting moments. You have to remind actors that this is your scene partner. You cannot be acting to the puppeteer. You have to be
Mhm.
acting to the puppet, and you have to treat them like a living, breathing creature. You also have to be very choreographed. I remind writers when they ask about like writing for puppets, like if you write a character walking to a door and opening that door, for a human, it doesn't take very long, right?
Mhm.
For a puppet, that is several hours in the rehearsal room. And especially our puppets tend to be a kind of modified bunraku puppet. So there's 3 puppeteers.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to move 3 puppeteers as a unit and a puppet to that door and opening it. And then every movement has meaning for the puppet when there's so many things that we just kind of throw away and take for granted as humans. I wouldn't put as much meaning to an actor walking to that door and opening it as I do watching a puppet do it. There's something strange about that. I think I've gotten off topic a little bit, but you have to be so intentional about it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a devising project once where we had a bunraku puppet, and we spent a good 2 weeks in and out just focusing on breathing. It's just the simple act of like, how does this puppet breathe before it moves? Because otherwise it doesn't have that life that it is. I think one of the sort of hardest things about acting with a puppet is sort of, right, everything needs to be choreographed. Simultaneously, you also have to be in the moment reacting to what the puppet is doing and discovering what the puppet is doing. And so as a scene partner, it's so much more important that even the slightest shifts in that puppet can sort of inform your performance.
Absolutely.
I have more questions about that, about like, like your puppet workshops, all that stuff. We're talking with Chelsea Sutton from Rogue Artists Ensemble. We'll be right back. Hey there, Josh Hsu here. If you've been enjoying our episodes and the stories we bring to life, there are a couple of easy ways that you can help us keep the fire burning. First, hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And if you want to take your support to the next level, you can buy us a coffee or even join our Patreon, helping us create more bold, design-forward, and innovative theater experiences. You'll find all the links on our website at forgetheaterlabs.com. Your support, whether it's a subscription, a donation, or just sharing the show with friends, makes a huge difference. Thanks for helping us forge ahead. At Forge Theater Labs, we want this podcast to be as collaborative as it was when we created it. That's where you come in. Have an idea for a future episode, a guest you'd love to hear from, or just thoughts on how we can make the show even better? Feel free to email us at info@forgetheaterlabs.com. Your voice shapes the stories we tell, so don't be shy. Let us know what you think. Welcome back. I'm Josh Hsu from Forge Theater Labs, and we're speaking with Chelsea Sutton from Rogue Artist Ensemble. Welcome back, Chelsea.
I'm very excited to be here.
So we were just talking about bunraku, and it occurred to me that we didn't actually define that for our audience. And so for those who are unfamiliar with what bunraku puppets are, can you help us define that?
I can definitely define it in how we use the term. A bunraku puppet, in at least the Rogue world, is a 3 puppeteer puppet. It often has one puppeteer, like the lead puppeteer, over the head and one of the arms. One puppeteer does the other arm, and one puppeteer is on the feet. So our wood boy puppet was a bunraku puppet, and there was a 3-person team moving him at all times. So it's a Japanese style of puppetry, and it is incredibly, like, if you are a true bunraku puppeteer, like, you train your entire life to do this well. So I can't say that we are like true by definition bunraku, but we take inspiration in our designs usually from that. That tends to be what we do. Not all of our puppets end up being that way, but it is sort of has ended up being kind of a hallmark of a lot of our puppets when we make them.
And I think some of the hallmarks of your puppets that I've seen, for me, when I think of Rogue Artist Ensemble, is how large and how lifelike they are, despite the aesthetics being, a little bit on the horror themed, a little bit creepy, a little bit out there, a little bit different. How long does a typical rehearsal process take for 3 puppeteers to manipulate one puppet? Like, what is your typical length of rehearsal process?
I first love to say I love that you said we have a creepy aesthetic. We've been joking lately that we had like our Tim Burton era, just like first like 10 years of our existence was just trying to be Tim Burton. Um, a typical rehearsal process for any puppets is longer than your normal theater rehearsal process. I mean, a normal theater rehearsal process might be 3 or 4 weeks, depending on how much time you're rehearsing during the day. You want to tack on another like 2 or 3 weeks at least if you can afford it. I mean, in the before times when we were all just college students playing around, that might take even longer. But often there are puppet only rehearsals because I think we were talking a little bit on the break about breathing. Like it can be a couple hours, especially if it's puppeteers who don't know each other, who are just coming in, have never touched this puppet before. They just have to learn how to breathe together and then make the puppet breathe. How does the puppet just move a little? All those little twitches and movements and things that we do, and we don't pay attention to it when we're breathing and just existing. That is the kind of intricate detail you have to put into the puppet before you even have him walk across the stage or have him say some lines.
So speaking of that, right? Like, for a Bunraku puppet, and I have questions about the other puppets in a second, but like is the builder there in the rehearsal room so that they're able to make adjustments live? Like, is it a process that's private with the director and the puppeteers? How does that sort of typical rehearsal process look like between adjustments to the puppets?
Totally. I mean, it is an ongoing collaboration. It's all of the above. So I think typically when we have identified a character in a play that needs to be a puppet, designs start right away. Um, we did a show called Happy Fall last summer, and forever the main puppet, which is a life size Bunraku ish puppet, so it's the size of a man, like a human
Oh,
man.
okay.
Um, but the mock-up puppet was our main puppet for several years, and he was made out of like wire and like pool noodles and stuff like that. Which I mean, I got very attached to that puppet. Like, let's just use that guy, the pool noodle puppet. But by having mock-ups, you can get first the puppeteers to get used to kind of the at least the base level movement and heaviness and weight that the puppet they're going to use is going to have. But also then the puppet designer can be in the room and can see like, oh, it's too big, or like, oh, I need to have the hand move in this particular way, or I need to have this kind of flexibility. The Happy Fall puppet actually was kind of built for the lead puppeteer's body. Like there is a concept of puppet fitting. Like a puppet needs to be able to fit to your body in a certain way for ergonomics so that the puppet does not crush the puppeteer.
Hmm.
So there's also a weight level. So while the puppet needs to look like it is maybe hefty and grounded and tangible in this world, it needs to be light enough for the puppeteer to hold it up for an hour or 30 minutes or however long these scenes are. So you have to balance all of those things as you're designing. So typically, hopefully, you're starting the process a year out from at least from when you're going to produce the show.
That's incredible. I love this idea because you talk about hyper theater, and I love this sort of contrast with we need to use all these things, so we also have to take it slow. And so
Yeah.
this idea of like that year long planning, taking it slow to sort of get there. Um, given that Bunraku is so intensive, is that a reason perhaps why you also do rod or marionette for gloves or masks in the other seasons to balance it out?
It's totally dependent on what the show needs.
Hmm.
So when we've done Bunraku, they tend to be our like hero puppets. So like the Wood Boy puppet, our main character. The Happy Fall puppet was, I mean, kind of a main character, but like the main puppet in the play that had the most emotional weight.
Hmm.
Um, Senior Plumber had also like we did the old man version of the character of Eugenio Plumber as an old man puppet who I tend to also I bring him to all the events that I can because he has these big blue eyes that just everyone falls in love with. Everyone thinks he looks like their grandfather. But he looks really real in an odd, uncanny way. Um, but that was he didn't have even kind of the traditional like rods and things in him that would make bunraku a little bit easier, but he was essentially built like that. But then we've had a lot of little hand puppets. We have a lot of shadow puppets that we do.
Hmm.
Um, we did a lot of miniature puppets in one of our past shows. Um, During Woodboy, we had these fish puppets that were mostly made out of trash, but were just these fish that could like when you puppeteered them, they kind of swirled in the air, but they were just a fish on a rod. Like puppets can be so simple, honestly.
So simple and so beautiful. I think I went to see the Bluey show, right? And they
Mm.
had birds. And one of the things, it was just a little bird that would flap on a rod. And it was
Yep.
just, and the shadows that cast and the way it moved made it feel so realistic. And I think that the simplicity of sort of making that. Um,
And that's why I like puppets, I guess. They tap into a playfulness that we lose when we grow up. And we often have to I mean, I will say that we do a lot of puppetry, but that doesn't mean everything we do has a puppet in it, nor do we wanna force a puppet into every single thing we do.
mm,
Um, but I tend to tell everyone in LA, like, we're the weird puppet people, we make puppet shows for adults often, but we have to remind adults that puppets are not just for kids, that they are for adults too, and they tap into an imagination and a playfulness that we often lose or forget that we have. And that hypertheater to me also is playfulness. We always find a way, even when we're doing really dark topics, which we often do, we approach it through playfulness. And that's what I think mask and puppets and all those kinds of things help us do.
absolutely. I think that's at the heart of it is like, puppets don't just have to be for kids, right? And I think about a lot of, the puppetry that we've been exposed to is that, when we think about puppets, we think about the Muppets, right? But
Mhm.
even their jokes are not meant for kids, right?
Oh,
They're
yeah.
meant for the
No.
parents. They're meant for the kids to partake in and enjoy, but at the end of the day, they're there for our edification, are there for our understanding, right?
Yeah.
Um so in that, obviously, how do you sustain an audience to be like, hey, I really want you to enjoy puppets. I know that you do have some educational programs for kids, right? That's a great way to sort of introduce them to sort of
Yeah.
the puppet theater
Mhm.
and build a long-term audience. What do
Absolutely.
those educational programs for kids look like for puppets?
Um, well, a lot of them are on a hiatus right now because we kind of went on hiatus with the pandemic and have not kind of built it back up yet. But we had a
Mhm.
couple long-running children's shows that were based on children's books, Frog Belly, Ratbone, and Zen Shorts. I think Zen Shorts is actually a cartoon right now. Um, but yeah, we had these elaborate shows and the Frog Belly actually was not that elaborate and it could go to schools pretty easily. Um, but beyond that, we often do mask or puppetry workshops with them. There's one puppet workshop we've often done that is like newspaper puppets, where we take newspaper and crumple them together. It's just newspaper and tape, and we make a puppet out of it. And basically, it's like a very raw bunraku kind of puppet. And then
Mhm.
we teach them how to work as a team to bring life to this little creature that we just made out of newspapers.
That is
Um,
exactly what I
you
did
know,
at home with my kid
yeah,
during the pandemic. So
yeah.
I appreciate that. We would make puppets out of random things. Um,
I mean, I think that's what you have to
mm,
do. That's the main you can puppeteer almost anything around you. You can breathe life into everything around you, and it makes you look at newspaper or sheets or, like, Kleenex or this pen or whatever, and you can make it into a living, breathing thing, and there's something magical about that when you can look at the world that way.
if you were to pick one favorite puppet that was built out of something like non-traditional, right? Like
Mhm.
something that shouldn't have been a puppet, but it became a puppet. Is there something that you could think of?
Um, I mean, this is going to be something only I would know, I guess. Um, One of our founding ensemble members, Miles Tabor, during the pandemic, I did this like live storytelling event that was like people coming on and telling ghost stories, and we had some puppets come on as characters to tell their ghost stories. And he made this piece that was just he just like had a sheet pulled really tightly and brought his hand through it and talked through the sheet. And I still think about it. It was just I don't know. It was something I for some reason, I've watched a lot of people create strange little characters just out of fabric. It's just a Kleenex or it's this, like, sheet that he pulled tightly, and suddenly it's this, like, crazy ghostly creature who's telling me a ghost story. And I think about it a lot, and I don't know, it was so simple.
I was thinking for our show notes, could you send us an image so that people can
Sure.
have a reference for that? I would love to share that with us.
I mean, I think the whole thing is still on YouTube. I can send you an image and the link.
And I think that speaks to the sort of playfulness, right? Is that sort of found object puppet is something that I think, right, proves that like performance can happen anywhere, anyhow.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's where the intersectionality between art and performance really, like in theater, really for me lie. Like is creating puppets or performances out of everyday objects. Like that is something that is sort of unique to what y'all do. And I think really visionary, right? In terms of where theater can go next and keep us grounded, keep us vital. Um, we'll be right back. We're going to talk a little bit more about what y'all have planned next. But in the meantime, I'm going to talk a little bit more to Chelsea about this hand puppet with a sheet because I can't wait to see a picture of it. We'll be right back. This is Forge Theater Labs. Want to get your brand in front of a passionate, creative, and engaged audience? Forge Theater Labs is looking for partners to sponsor this podcast and join us in bringing bold, innovative theater to life. If you'd like to place an ad right here, reach out to us at marketing@forgetheaterlabs.com. It's a simple, powerful way to support the arts while sharing your message with listeners who care about creativity and community. Again, that's marketing@forgetheaterlabs.com. Let's build something extraordinary together. Welcome back. You're listening to Forge Theater Labs. I'm Josh Hsu, your host, and I'm speaking to Chelsea Sutton about Rogue Artists Ensemble and their active creation. You just sort of mentioned this idea of like, Miles coming on screen, presenting a sheet and sticking his hand through it. Like, was this pre-planned? Were you aware of it? Like, was this just kind of impromptu?
He told me he had an idea. And would I let him just do his idea? I'm pretty sure that's the extent of it at the time. And usually, when Miles says that, I usually say, yeah, of course.
I'm really impressed that you just sort of like handed it over, said, go for it. I think that speaks to sort of how close your ensemble is. In terms of collaborations, I just want to sort of go back to this. In the development process, like how do your puppet builders, puppeteers, designers, and musicians kind of work together? Like, what is that sort of process like?
Well, our process is maybe a little unique than most other theaters. We have what we call development teams. So when someone brings together or brings forward an idea, and it really could just be, I want to do Pinocchio, and that's the end of the idea, great. If someone has a script, we don't tend to take scripts from outside of the ensemble. Everything is created, at least at this moment in time, from within our core membership. But in either case, here's our idea. We form a development team around it. And this team, I think of them as like the fairy godmothers of the show. So they're at the beginning, at the birth of that play, and they help feed it through research, through design ideas, because it's always a mix of people on that team. There are actors, there's directors, there's the playwright that's eventually going to write it, designers, anyone who, and sometimes if we need an expert on something, if we're writing something, let's say about the Gold Rush era, we're not, but if we are, we'd find that expert to come in and give feedback. So we're feeding that play from the very beginning. And then we also are defining like what the mission and the values and like what is the theme and the point of this play? Why are we doing, going back to your why now question, why are we doing this play right now? Why is it going to endure? And so when the play moves through our development process, which is usually a reading, a workshop, and then we eventually get to the production, the development team carries through the whole thing. At a certain point, when we get into production mode, some of those folks may end up being the designer on the show or the director. Some of them don't. They stay as just development team. But that still means that they have a job to do, which is to come and watch the show, watch rehearsal, and say, hey, you guys, this isn't the mission. You lost your
Mm.
way. Or give feedback if we got stuck somewhere and bring us back into the safety of like, really, what are we doing? Because it's so easy to get lost in production, man. So easy.
Absolutely. It's so easy and it's so quick, right? Just because of all the technical aspects that are required, the rehearsal time developed. Obviously, this is a long process. And
Yeah.
so, my question to you is there ever a point where, you go from development to workshop, but then you never make it to production? Or perhaps it is required to go back to development before that other workshop? Like, does that ever happen to you?
I mean, you're triggering all the traumas right now. Absolutely. Unfortunately, sometimes, yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's a benefit to us or not that we will just turn back around and start over again sometimes. The Woodboy Dogfish play that I keep mentioning was just called the Pinocchio Project for 10 years before I even came on. There were at least 3 playwrights that went through drafts of this thing. It had numerous readings. I think I saw all of them, honestly, and had at least a couple workshops. And like workshops that were like, there's design and there are masks made and there's a mock-up of the puppet and it is far along. And I was not part of the ensemble during that time, so I don't actually know the real reasons why we said, "Oh, this is not the way we wanna go," or "This isn't working," or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that play probably should have premiered 5 years before I even was a glimmer in anybody's eye, but it didn't because we kept turning it around. We gotta get it right.
Absolutely. I love this idea that there is that sort of flexibility. Like, how do you determine, right? Like if a playwright should continue, if a fresh perspective is needed, like how does that ensemble, because you have company members, sort of come to that conclusion? Like, what is that sort of right defining line, or that like, golden rule in order to move to production for you?
Oh, I wish we had a golden rule. I should work on that. I think it's really at least right now, it is very project specific. We have a play called Cowboy Electra that I'm not joking has been in some sort of development for like 15 years, which is a little embarrassing when we're a 20-year-old company. Um, and we don't even remember who brought the idea. It's that long ago. Somebody somewhere back in Rogue Time said, "Cowboys and Electra. What if we put them together?" So it is a play in theory that is set during early Los Angeles before the trains get here, and it's like the Electra story, but placed in that world. So we got all the way to a workshop at the Getty Villa in January of 2020,
Whew.
which, you know, things
Yes,
happen.
right before that pandemic.
But like also how we define theater, how we talk about representation, how we produce theater, and how we think about working together and collaborating changed drastically, like across the industry after that time. And so we were able to really look at that play and look at like having a white writer, having like why are we setting it during this period of time, or what representation are we actually exploring here, are we doing this the wrong way? Or what are we even saying anymore? What is the story? So we basically just went back to the drawing board. Um, so we have a new playwright who's kind of come on and will be working a little bit with the older playwright. Not She's not older, but the past playwright. But I think she's really trying to reimagine what this play can be. So in this instance, while we have these like little germs and seeds of an idea of what that play could be, we're just walking it back and we're trying to get down to basics. Really, what are we saying with this? Why this period of time? Why these characters? Why Electra? Why are we going back to Greek stories? Why all of these things?
I applaud the company's sort of flexibility with that, because oftentimes, after devoting so many resources to an idea, there is this desire just to sort of get it out into the world and then be done with it, right? And then, or to be able to say, like, we have this previous project, but it doesn't fit today. And so we need to sort of revisit those tools that we used to create it, revisit the processes, revisit those thoughts. And I think that's what kind of keeps your company, in my mind, like at the forefront of innovation. We're coming to the end of our time today, so I thought I might ask you, like, what's next for you? What, obviously you're working on Cowboy Electra. What's coming up this fall?
Well, Cowboy will have a small reading in October, on October 23rd, I believe, at the Autry Museum in Los Angeles. Um, and then we're also doing a workshop production that same month, because why not do everything at the same time? I have a play that I'm writing called Far Worse Things, which I wrote a first draft of in our first year of Rogue Lab. It's a horror play that is about urban explorers who go into an abandoned building in Los Angeles. And my whole idea for it was that I wanted the walls and the set to be a puppet. So the space, the building kind of comes to life. The building itself is a character. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, we're not going to do all that in a workshop, but so we're still figuring out the story. But going back to your why now, I was inspired to write it based on some work I did with like historical preservation when I was in grad school, and this idea of like who gets to decide what is historic and worth preserving, and what is worth throwing away, and that's not very equal in my mind. And go ahead.
No, absolutely. I think it resonates with me so much because, in terms of like Forge Theater Labs and my thoughts about theater, and it is very much a question that is always like, what is worth throwing away? What is worth keeping? And are we only doing certain conventions? Are we only using certain models of presenting because it's the way it's been done, even though it may not be effective, and that may come down to business practices. That can come down to the way we present or build our work. I think that is a very prescient thing for our time, is what we determine in our world works, doesn't work, and how we hold on to those that do and don't.
And who gets to make those decisions too?
Yeah.
It's the like history is defined by the people in power or the winners, or that kind of thing.
Oh, let's hope not. Let's hope not.
Yeah. But so since Kaidan, this is probably the first horror play that we've done. So it'll be fun.
I'm really excited.
Yeah.
You'll have to send me tickets and then a plane flight, and then I'll come out.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I hope you'll come back on the podcast soon.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. This is Forge Theater Labs. I'm Josh Hsu. We've been speaking to Chelsea Sutton from Rogue Artist Ensemble. Have a great night, everyone.
Forge Theater Labs is produced by Josh Hsu. Audio production by Sam Rappaport. Intro drum beat by Dave Register. Incidental music by Super Order. And closing music by Corey Melanson.